Welcome everyone to Diverse Voices, dedicated sharing leadership stories with viewers. Hi, LinkedIn. Hi, YouTube. Welcome my guest today, Dawn Potter-Sander. Hi, Dawn.
Hello, Michael.
Hello. I'm so thrilled to have you here today. For those in our audience, Dawn is an expert at helping leaders and their teams navigate new seasons. She's a multi-certified executive coach and founder of DPS Leadership. She works with Saterman Connect. DPS Leadership is a global consulting practice specializing in strengths-based coaching and team development. Dawn has spent more than 14 years as a strengths-based coach and 25 years in developing leaders and energizing teams around the world. Dawn, I think we're going to have a really exciting conversation today. I'm really excited.
I'm excited too, because we always do.
I know. You and I tend to have a little bit of fun together.
We do.
I was thinking a little bit about our conversation in preparation for today's discussion. And I was realizing that even though I am well attuned as a CliftonStrengths coach to CliftonStrengths and its power, I think that there's a lot that people are looking at and leaders are looking at relative to the power that employees have at this moment in time, where they have a lot of options. There's a lot of organizations that have gone hybrid or fully remote, and it creates a lot of opportunity. But I think that understanding each other is really a way for cultures to evolve and to work better together. I thought we might talk a little bit about the way in which CliftonStrengths sort of expands people's worldview to see their environment through other people's eyes. And there's a lot of assessment tools that exist, DISC and Myers-Briggs. Because you're such an experienced coach, can you talk a little bit about CliftonStrengths, its background, and why it exists?
Sure. CliftonStrengths was born out of positive psychology. Don Clifton built it after 25 years of research. And what he was looking at was, what are the innate natural talents that people have? And he organized it in 34 different themes of talent that are organized in 4 domains of leadership. Those domains, as Michael, we know, are executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. And what the strengths assessment does is it gives you a common language by which you can understand your natural gifts, what truly makes you great. Again, the positive psychology side. And then how are you going to show up in the world using that? And then the nuance that I like about it is it's about performance. It's about how you work. And what my clients have told me is they like this assessment better than DISC and Myers-Briggs for a couple of reasons. One is it's a lot easier to understand the terminology, and it gives you that common language, as I just mentioned. The second thing they like about it is it's broader. It provides a broader depth of information. All assessments, by the way, I will back up, are great. They're validated. They provide awareness. They're applicable. It's all about insights. But the clients that I work with have found more value, and I have personally, with the CliftonStrengths. So again, it's that common language. It's aimed at performance. Most of my clients like the positive psychology about focusing on really what you're great at and doing more of it and leaning into that. Conventional wisdom in the way I was brought up was focus on your weakness. But what you and I have known as strength coaches is, if I focus on my weaknesses or the things that are less dominant, incremental improvement. Nice. Focus on my strength, exponential improvement. And so that's really why I like it. And it seems to really resonate with my clients. And particularly in a time when diversity, inclusion, and equity discussions are happening, it's a time for people to create a better understanding of who people are and how they work.
Yeah, I think that I love that you use language including positive, because there are leaders who perhaps are a bit of a former school of helping people shoring up where they're not showing up well. But what I understand and what you've portrayed is as an individual knows themselves, a leader understands their team better. It allows them to put people in the right roles.
Correct.
And that is a positive shift in a work culture, because now we're aligning to where people will perform well, and setting them up for success, which in essence sets the entire team up for success. And I think that sort of sets the stage for talking about the benefits of strengths-based coaching one-on-one. Like when you're talking to an individual who's exploring Gallup's strengths and strengths-based coaching, what's the benefits to that individual person?
That's a great question. There's so many, but the first benefit is that awareness. And we that work in leadership development understand that self-awareness is the kind of crux of emotional intelligence. And so that key window into ourselves is the first most important thing that you get. You get to really understand how you tick and why you tick and why you do the things that you do. Then the other benefit is you can start appreciating it and recognizing it. Then you can aim it to the work that you do or to your personal life. And when you get to do that, Gallup's research shows that we're 3 times more likely to have a high quality of life. Who doesn't want a high quality of life? So that's a benefit. The other benefit is you're 6 times more likely to be engaged in your work. And that is also great. So that's what, when we talk about the Great Resignation and people leaving or making decisions about employment, they want to be engaged in work. They want to enjoy what they're doing.
Yeah, I think there's so much to that. One of our listeners or viewers was sharing that is positive because you're focusing on your strengths. To your point of recognition, who doesn't want to be seen for the best of themselves?
That's right.
There's that opportunity to show up a little bit differently at work. I think what can be really interesting for managers as they're trying to move their culture along is that strengths offers them a way to see their team differently and sort their team and help them to maximize and amplify each other's work efforts.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if there's maybe 1 or 2 things that strengths really means for managers that those who are listening today can really focus on where Gallup Strengths can help them.
Oh gosh, as a manager, oh wow, I get so excited about this. I'm like, oh, we can do this, we can do this. It helps managers, to your point earlier, tune into what each individual on their team naturally does with ease and excellence and energy. Ease, excellence, energy, which drives to that employee engagement. So it kind of buys them a clue. Michael, have you ever watched The Wheel of Fortune?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. So when they do like that thing at the end, they give you the clues. They give you the R, S, T, L, N, and the E. Those are the clues to get you started. So as a manager, it gives you a clue into the person that's working with you. People are dynamic. It's social science. There's a lot more to it, but it gives you that clue, a window into them of what you can bring out of them. So that's one thing. The other thing it gives you that way in which you can talk to them, and it gives you a way in which to pull out their greatness. And the other thing is it can kind of diffuse some frustration. I don't know if anybody of our listeners are married or in personal relationships, but sometimes we have friction when we're so different. So the other thing it gives us is just an understanding of how someone shows up. It's natural. So one of the key things about strengths is they come with positive intent. So my spouse does not intend to drive me crazy with his deliberative thinking. That is exactly opposite of mine. But sometimes I'm like, just make a decision. And so when I know that he comes by it naturally, it neutralizes that frustration, not only for the manager, but also for the team. So that's a huge advantage for the manager and the team.
That's really wonderful. I like how you just talked about the elements of interaction. And when I think of those 34 strengths, I'm thinking of a teammate that I know, but I'm also thinking of some of our clients, and I'm going to sort of lean into how might someone who's an achiever and someone who's high in intellection be challenged and have conflict, because someone who's high in achiever is very much go, 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 and expects when they're engaging with someone that they have that excitement and electricity in everything that they're trying to accomplish in a day, while someone who's intellection might be hearing things and sort of sitting back, processing, so they don't come across as engaged. But if you understand the person you're talking to is high intellection, you're an achiever, you can know to moderate yourself to be like, I know you, and you need a little time to think. Can we reconnect tomorrow and talk about what we've just discussed to make sure we have a plan of action? Giving them the latitude and space. So it really leads into the idea of strengths evolving the way that those talents show up at work. And maybe there's something about those talents we can talk to for our viewers.
Yeah, and like using achiever and intellection is a great example. And it leads me to a discussion about bias and assumptions people make, right? So it's easy for an achiever. I have achiever. Interestingly enough, I have achiever high and intellection low. So this works really well. Is I could make the unfortunate and inaccurate assumption that somebody with intellection is not as engaged in my conversation if I see them thinking and not talking back with me or moving at the clip I am. I have actually made this assumption in the past incorrectly, and it's hurt me, where I assume that somebody maybe wasn't as interested. In fact, I was teaching a class one time and I just wasn't connecting with this participant. And I left the class and I told one of my co-facilitators, I'm like, I won't tell you the person, like, this person really didn't like the class. I couldn't connect. And I'm like, oh, so frustrating. I don't think they were learning. And, my achiever's like, must learn, much teach. You know what happened the next day?
No.
I got the nicest email about the impact of the training that had on this person. And I was blown away and reminded that I can't make assumptions about an individual based on their interaction. There could be more going on. And in this case, that person was really thinking and processing, and I process out loud, and I'm much more of a go, 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 high energy kind of person. So that's one way it affects the culture. Another way that it affects the culture is to what you talked about earlier, is we can intentionally tap into that intellection when we need it. So I was actually just working on a project yesterday, and I'm like, oh, I'm drained by intellection. I need some thought partners on this. Who can help me think this through? Kevin. Kevin has intellection. So I'm calling Kevin, getting his thoughts to help me process it. So you can tap into their genius. And when people get called for help in an area of strength, it feels good because A, you're seeing me. You see me for who I am. Not only do you see me for who I am, you're validating it and you're recognizing it and you're appreciating it. And then, hey, I can help you in something that's really easy. Mm-hmm. That feels good. So it's kind of an extra bonus.
No, that's great. You have spoken to something I made sure I wanted to broach in this conversation, which is how can strengths unite a team? And by understanding someone on the other side, you're approaching them from the standpoint of their strengths, their naturally inclined talents. So it shortens, to your point. I love your analogy of Wheel of Fortune. It gives you a hint and a clue into what's the best way to engage this person, or who's the ideal partner to help me solve this problem at this moment in time. Are there other ways that strengths can unite a team beyond what we just discussed?
Oh, gosh, beyond what we discussed, so many ways. It is that it's that appreciation and awareness that gets to aiming it to something. It unites people in a goal too. Is if you're working on a team and you're working on a project, it can unify the team by connecting to what they're good at. I don't know if this is gonna make sense, but if if you get to pick on what the different people are that works best, it creates respect. I had somebody one time in my career say, isn't it manipulative to kind of play to their strengths, and, you know, if it's an analytical person, and give them the proof sources and talk about data? And I said, no, it is respectful to speak their language. If you've ever traveled to a different country, what do we try to do? Speak their language. So it's a way for me to build a connection, build a rapport, deepen the relationship. So that's another thing. It's that deepening the relationship in a time when we're worried about employee retention. We need our employees to be connected with us.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't feel connected with us, they're going to be vulnerable for that recruiter who calls, or that LinkedIn update that pops up that they've been pushing down. The connection needs to be to us and the people that they work with, to feel that family and feel that place to be truly who they are.
Well, and that speaks so beautifully into the concept of equity,
Yes.
And inclusion and belonging, where now I know I'm seen, I know I'm heard for or respected for what I'm bringing to the table.
Yes.
And to that point of manipulation, we know, to your point, we know our partners, we know our closest friends. We want to play into, in essence, meeting them where they're at.
Yes.
So we're meeting them on their terms to have a productive conversation, even if it's a casual one.
Yes. Yes. What matters to them, right? What's the construct or frame or the language that's going to resonate with them? Yeah, absolutely. It's respectful. And that's the type of environment we're trying to create in the world. And as we deal with D&I issues and equity issues across the board, I think strengths are fundamental. And I've seen them not only help the leader, but I've seen the biggest lift on my work with clients is when the team takes the time to understand each other, because you get a collective, you almost hear this sigh that happens. It's like, oh. And sometimes people make, again, these assumptions about people based on their strengths that have nothing to do with what's going on. And we're living in a hyper-connected, overwhelmed, overworked, overtaxed time. And that's when assumptions are ripe. They're they're running rampant. And the more that we can intentionally interrupt those assumptions with data and information, the better we are.
That is really intriguing. I think that it plays right into a note we received from one of our viewers. Alessandra is talking a little bit about something you mentioned early on, of ease, excellence, and energy, but she mentions positive intent and how important it is for the discussion. I think that many people are used to being in a meeting or in a conversation, and it's full of friction and conflict. Mm-hmm. And some people operate really well. They want that conflict and friction because it may push people to solve problems a little bit differently. But I'm really curious in relation to her statement, where we can look at positive intent being important and influential in a discussion. Is there something we can talk to about that?
Yeah, of course. I'm so glad she joined. Thanks for joining and adding to the conversation. I think it's a ground rule almost. It's the first step is to assume it, is to know that for example, I talk out loud. I have something called ideation, and it's a little bit like popcorn over my head. You can probably even see these light bulbs going off for me. And I don't intend to derail a conversation. I don't intend to be that person chasing a rabbit, but I sometimes do. When we assume that it's in positive intent for the greater good, then we don't bring unnecessary negative energy to the conversation. Mm-hmm. We keep all the energy capitalized in the right direction. And I find that negative energy, assumptions, the leaning into the friction or the stories we tell, derail us from achieving what we're trying to do. And there's enough pressure right now, time and otherwise, that if we just kind of put that over there and just like this isn't about trying to drive somebody crazy or derail, or they're not doing it to be a showboat, right? It's not about being a showboat or getting attention. It's just who they are.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also appreciating people, which is a great way of looking at it. When we were preparing for this conversation, I love hearing and learning about myself through the stories others tell.
Mm-hmm.
Shared a little bit as I was trying to understand how strengths can set a team up for success. So we talked a little bit early on in this dialogue of, what you can learn about yourself from strengths, right? Because understanding yourself allows you to understand others. And I think it's really an imperative, if not for the manager, for the teams themselves, to understand how strengths can set a team up for success. And you talked a little bit about an operations manager who is feeling a certain way. I think it would be valuable for the viewers for you to share that story and how it relates to strengths in and of itself.
Yeah, it kind of came up because you were asking about like a transformation, and I'm like, transformation, big word. And then I started thinking about transformations, and transformations are really about the small shifts that yield big results. And that's what I always like to get for, is a small shift, big results. I was working with this team, and we did a typical strengths team session where we put the strengths on a grid and we talk about each person's strengths and the power that those strengths bring, and then sometimes the edge of it. And the manager opened up about his high empathy and the fact that he was physically giving himself an ulcer trying to lead in a way that engaged the warehouse. Mm-hmm. And the warehouse had a kind of a shtick, if you will, where they complained about everything. And it was really more like they could have been just talking baseball, but it was just how they bantered, and everything was about a complaining or a frustration, but they weren't really real. They were like, oh, it's so hot in here. It wasn't anything like a sauna or anything. And so the leader really tried to fix everything. And so when they realized that the manager was taking on all this, and it became heavy for him, and he was internalizing it, and then he was adding to his thought process of overthinking about it, they just had a ground rule of like, if there was a problem, the warehouse would take it to him. If the manager came in the warehouse and he heard the shtick, it was just shtick. And the manager knew that it was nothing he needed to act on. And that one small shift physically changed the leader and created a much better communication between the employees and the leader. And they realized what were the important things to solve. So they also focused on the most important stuff.
I really appreciate that, because it gave them the space to have the discussion, where it's like, you're going to overhear a lot of stuff that we talk about in our warehouse, and it's just our way of being friendly. And for those who may or may not know, just because you're not high in empathy doesn't mean you as an individual aren't empathetic. But people who are high in empathy tend to almost have like a sixth sense about emotion. So it sounds like this operations manager was getting a bit of mixed message.
Yes.
Like, I'm hearing these little statements and thought, and trying to pick up on the nuance of people's emotional state and the dissatisfaction they may be feeling, but it's a false signal. It's like it's a fog of the conversation. And I really appreciate that, because now they understood each other. It's like that he knew, or she knew, or they knew not to listen to that language, but that the team knew it's important that we engage our manager when we have an issue, and that they know they are a trusted partner. Right. So it's a reinforcing and creating dialogue that may not be as readily available as it was otherwise.
Yeah.
It's really intriguing that transformation, even though people talk about transformation, how powerful it can be, because I know that there may be viewers who operate in a work environment that feels very political, right? People are always out to get each other, or it's always a moment of it. I use the language friction, which can be unhealthy. It can be mentally draining. But I think that one of the powers of strengths is it creates this dialogue of understanding. So as we're having a meeting, it's not a meeting for a meeting's sake, a meeting just to churn things out, but creating conversation to solve a problem. Like, a classic question is, what does success look at the end of this conversation? What's our agenda going into this meeting? We want to solve for X. We want to discover new ideas, whatever that conversation may be. And strengths allows people just to be seen for who they are, which sounds very soft, but it allows you to get more done because there's power in that dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Gallup's research, they will tell you that, I forget the exact statistics, but I think it's like 8.5 times more productive when you focus on teams that focus on their strengths, and then they're more profitable teams because you take away all that friction. You take away that negative intent in the story cycle. What happens oftentimes is we create stories. I tell some of my clients the story is when I first started at this Fortune 500 company I worked with, I ran across a situation where in the interaction with my leader, I assumed he was micromanaging me. I assumed he didn't trust me. I questioned my decision to join the company. And I almost left. Fast forward ahead, I stayed there 12 years, but all based on one interaction. And it was based on the fact that my leader had high analytical strengths. I don't. And so I went in and I must have sounded like Charlie Brown on the phone and telling this sob story and talking to my strengths and like this compelling, long, wonderful story of how it's the right thing to do. And he wasn't buying it. But when I pivoted and put it in a spreadsheet, again, being respectful of how he needs to hear information, you know what he said to me, Michael?
No.
He said, "Why didn't you say this yesterday?" And I was like, ugh. So I created the story in my head that night that he doesn't trust me. How can I possibly work here? I need to get back to my former employer. And maybe some expletives might have been involved. But what I didn't realize is it had nothing to do with me. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about him. Nothing happened in the interaction. Nobody did anything wrong. It was a story that I created based on one piece of information, just like my intellectual participant. He's not interested.
You often talk about some of these moments and these interactions, and because you've been working for strengths for so long, because I can think of interactions I've had with clients and managers, and they'll talk a little bit about the shift. It's amazing that here's where we were 6 months ago, and here's the shift we're seeing now. I'm seeing people being more open to conversations, etc. Can you think back to some of your interactions, because some of your relationships with clients have been relatively long?
Yeah.
Where they may have been and how strengths changed the trajectory of the way in which people were working together because of their focus on each other's strengths, where that may not have even been on their radar prior to engaging with Gallup.
Yeah, there's one team that I worked with, and I worked with a lot. And it was a team of, I don't know how to describe them. They were just individuals. They were a bunch of silos, right? They were interconnected silos that believed that there was no interdependencies and there was no really value in collaboration. There was nothing in it for them. And so what happened was, I talk about a window, right? The window opened for them and they could see clearer with the strengths. And so they started to see how other people on the team could help them. And so instead of like beating their head up against the wall, working in an area of non-dominant strength, they started to call on each other. They started to rely on each other, and they started to see each other for who they were and compete less against them. And then those people that had competition, as it's one of the strengths, they aimed it externally, and they went from being one of the lower performing organizations in the company they were an organization that had metrics associated with it, to I think number 2 or number 3. And so it not only was visible in terms of their employee engagement interactions, it actually manifested in results that were measurable. And what we know about employee engagement, for those who don't know about employee engagement is a leading indicator of performance. Employee engagement is about the culture, and we talked about that earlier. It's about the culture. And if you want to know where the performance of your business is headed, look at what's going on your teams, how connected they are and how engaged they are. Gallup does a whole survey on that. And so do other tools and instruments. But if you assess their engagement, it will be a leading indicator, a sign, again, a clue to where your business is going. Looking at your performance at the end of the year is a lagging indicator. It's like, okay, where did we end up? But if you want to see where it's going, tune in.
Well, and that story fits so beautifully into the focus of this conversation, the turnover tsunami that has been talked about. It makes me think that you and I could have a bit of focus on this from two angles. One is, for those of our viewers who are watching, who are curious, where I'm at doesn't feel right anymore. I want to find someplace else. It sounds like they can talk to, when they're searching for potentially a new role at a new company, at another company, talking to that recruiter or someone around employee engagement. What does it look like for that organization? If I'm planning on coming to your family, working with your organization, what's engagement look like? And ask that interviewer to tell a story about what engagement looks like within their organization. But I also think there's opportunity to look at what could that mean for the organization they're in right now? Like making the best of the situation that they do have to determine if they're on the fence, if where they are is something they want to have. Where can engagement shift within an organization, given the situation that exists in the workforce today?
So many places. So, and it's where we have to be intentional. And I look at it as a core place leaders need to focus. But what's happening is the leaders are overwhelmed. They're like, I can't do this. I can't look at engagement and my profitability and my operations, all this. It's like an extra. HR, stop bugging me with this. I don't have time for it. And so what leaders need to do is integrate engagement into the normal course of their routine. So this is a little off topic. I'll come back. But it's, if you're having a one-on-one conversation, ask your employee, on a scale of 1 to 5, how engaged are you today? And what would do to move it up? Or what would it do to keep it at a 5? If you're doing a ride along with a sales rep, talk about their engagement then. If you have a quarterly meeting or a business review, get a pulse survey, do other kind of pulse surveys, ask in the normal course of what you already have scheduled. But going back to what it can do is, I think that was the question, is like what it can do to, is it could help, I think it could help with, again, like I said earlier, it can help with retention, employee retention, people leaving. It could help with productivity. It could help with making decisions about what's next. Is people fail to support what they fail to help create. I was just talking to a client about that this morning, is you could bring the employees into the discussion about return to work policies or hybrid policies or what could be. And what I say to leaders out there that are maybe having those questions in their head about maybe I should leave, or maybe the company doesn't value me, I say, don't just jump, right? If you've had a good career there and you have felt valued in the past, assume positive intent of the organization as well. And don't be at the effect of what's happening. Create what you want to happen. So think about your strengths, think about what you want for what's next, and see if you can create it where you are and save you the hassle of having to shift and building a whole new career somewhere else, right? So first try where you are and see what you can do, and tune into each person that you work with. And the last thing I'll say, Michael, is I had a leader once say, like, why should I be the one that has to like adjust and customize my approach to my employees? You know what I said? I said, because you're the leader and your employees will follow your lead. And when you do it, they will feel safe to do the same. And if you want them to do something, then you need to be willing to do it as well.
Sure. What I really appreciate about what you've shared is, yes, every organization to some degree is focused on the effort of today, what's right in front of me. But if you take a step back and look forward 12 months, what sort of shifts in culture do you want? What do you want to grow into? And that
Right.
doesn't mean that even in a mature organization, the environment's always shifting around you. Like, thinking that you're the big dog in whatever industry you're in isn't a
Yeah.
guarantee of success. There are plenty of examples in business history where an organization was at the top of their game and then they missed the mark because they weren't looking ahead. I think that if we talk a bit about HR and the future of HR, I'm really curious, is there something that you'd like to see within this space, maybe 3 or 5 years from now? Do you have any thoughts about, is there a future iteration of HR or business culture that you'd like to see implemented in the next few years?
I have lots. So like there's popcorn in my head. This was not a prepared question. So yeah, I would like to see HR develop competencies in leading and teaching more to help the organizations adapt to the changes and build on from where they are, but I do think staying in lanes of strengths and building on and being okay to pivot and helping build resilience. And I do think the space of like unconscious bias and awareness, I also think that there's a role to play for, I don't know the right word, it's resilience, but it's in meditation. It's like helping provide space and structure and systems for people to have balance in their day and I'd love to see HR be more innovative and creating workspaces that are conducive to people to working in their strengths and bringing out the best in people and being able to customize the environment to those strengths.
That's a beautiful sentiment, because that gives HR the ability to create cultures universally that play to people's strengths.
Absolutely.
And are inclusive in so many ways. What a brilliant way to end our time together. Dawn, I want to really thank you for sharing with us your perspective. I hope that our viewers have gotten a way of looking at the culture that they're in today and finding a little bit of safety and solace to evolve that into something that they'd like it to be, because the grass isn't always greener. But if they do choose to find a new route, that they look for something that plays into their strengths and that will engage them with the talents that they have and can bring to bear for that culture. Dawn, thank you so very much for spending a little time with us today.
Thank you, Michael. I enjoyed it.
Truly a pleasure. For everyone else, thank you again. We'll see you next week, and everyone be well. All right. Bye, Dawn.